everyone. My name is Halima Siddiqui, and I'm a project coordinator here at Health Nexus. Health Nexus oversees several provincial initiatives related to FASD, the FASD provincial website, where you can find recent and up-to-date information about what's happening, learn more about resources and tools, and find out services available in your local community. We also allocate subsidies every year to 40+ support groups for individuals with FASD and their families. And we designed an online training for service providers from various sectors, including healthcare and nursing, education, mental health and addictions, justice and corrections, and community and social work. Before we begin with the presentation, I would like to just go over some quick house rules. During the presentation, you may be tempted to ask questions at the end about yourself or loved ones with FASD. Please do not use any identifying information to protect people's privacy. By law, we have a duty to report to Children Aid Society or police any threat to a child or direct attempt to harm yourself or someone else. Presenters cannot provide clinical advice, as this would require professional counseling and more in-depth knowledge of the situation and behaviors at stake. Today's discussion provides information about latest research, evidence-based practice, or general education tips and advice. If you need ongoing support, please consider connecting with your local FASD worker for supports or join one of our Health Nexus support groups for individuals with FASD and their families. You can find this information on our website, fasdinfo.tsaf.ca. So I'd just like to introduce everyone to our speaker today. Alice Audrain is a proud queer mixed race Black francophone parent. She is a project manager, researcher, consultant, and activist. Parenting amazing kids led her to develop her knowledge and skills in many fields like neurodivergence or invisible disabilities, among others. Thanks to her personal and professional experience of challenges faced by diverse communities, she uses her political science training to apply an interdisciplinary, intersectional vision to tackle complex realities and create lasting change. Diversity is at the heart of her identity and her work. Passionate about social justice, she is also active in politics and volunteers with community organizations. She sits on the board of 10 Oaks, an organization that provides programs for youth and families in the Ottawa area queer community. She's also a parent ambassador for the organization Parents Partenaires en Éducation and collaborates regularly with Interwoven Connections. We are thrilled to listen to her presentation. Please ask your questions in the Q&A, and I'll provide more information and links in the chat if need be. And with that, Alice, the stage is yours.
So hi, thank you for the introduction, Halima. First, thank you for being here today. It's pretty amazing that you took the time to just learn about the topic and wanted to explore this because it's very near and dear to my heart, of course. I do parent 3 kids who have FASD and who are Black, and it's pretty challenging, let's just say. I had an idea of what the presentation, what I wanted the presentation to be, and then something happened. I went to go see the movie Wicked. So some of you might say, okay, where does that go? Hopefully it will go somewhere. It's important for me, and like storytelling is very important for me. I think it's a great way to educate and make things relatable to people. But specifically this movie resonated with me and hopefully will help me guide you through the presentation and show you what the experience is about by using a fictional character and not having necessarily to share too much about my personal life and my kiddos. So today I decided to call the presentation Blackness and FASD, a Wicked Mix. Let's start. So I've already been introduced. I also disclosed that I was parenting kids with FASD who are also Black. I do specialize in intersectionality and diversity. Clearly that life chose me. I didn't choose it because I'm very intersectional myself. Yes, I am a mixed race. I'm queer, but I'm also a woman, immigrant. I'm a francophone. You can hear in my accent. My family is multi-religious. We celebrate Catholic and Jewish holidays here. So a lot of different mix, which makes it very exciting, but give me also a perspective that's very different from other people. Of course, before we start, I want to do a lane acknowledgement that's connected to the topic that we're discussing today. I invite you to acknowledge the tradition and lands that where you live and or you work right now. I'm currently on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe lands. And I do want to reaffirm my commitment to fostering inclusive spaces for everyone, including those with invisible disability, deserve a place where they belong. Supporting Black families raising children with FASD requires community and care, which is very something that's very pivotal and crucial, but very hard to achieve. And I will talk about this later during the presentation. I always think about the seven generation principle for me is key. Because today we want to make sure everybody's included and no one is left behind, because that will help us build an even stronger society for tomorrow and years to come. Just another reminder that I value my privacy, and I do need to have boundaries around my experience. But it's important for me to acknowledge the fact that it's hard to talk about FASD. It's hard to find people who are willing to talk about FASD. And it's hard to find parents or even people with FASD who are willing to talk about this, because there's a lot of stigma and taboo around it. So I really value the time and the moment when I'm able to share my experience and my life, though my kids' privacy is very important for them and for myself. And it's a difficult balance that I'm trying to navigate, and hopefully I'm good at. But I do want to talk about this because I want to lift the shame that is currently on FASD and about FASD. I want to educate people, and I really want to share to educate people, because I wouldn't want my kids to not talk about their Blackness because they're ashamed of being Black. So I don't want them to not talk about FASD because they're ashamed to have FASD. I want to treat both subjects the same, which is, if there's no shame, then we need to overcome and fight the shame and not embrace it. So I'm going to unapologetically talk about FASD today. What is FASD? Because we talk about FASD. Hopefully, if you're here to learn about the interaction between Blackness and FASD, you already know what FASD stands for. So I'm not going to go into it more. You can Google if you need to. You want to really go deeper into understanding FASD. I want to talk more about the confusion after you learn what FASD is. People are not sure where to put it, like how it qualifies. Like there's just a lot of confusion. So it's important for me to consider it today as what it is, which is a disability. Why is it a disability? Because it is a brain injury. It occurs, of course, I hope you know, when alcohol is consumed during pregnancy and impact the fetus brain, which leads to having an impact on how the person develops. So it is a brain injury. It differs from other diagnoses because since it's an injury on like the brain, which is it's a very complex part of the body, which means like you can never know how what is going to impact, what's going to happen, how it's going to, the evolution of it. Like there's a lot of unknown and instability around that diagnosis. So it's very specific. It's a lifelong disability. Common symptoms that you do find in almost everybody who has a FASD is impulsivity, memory deficits, or dysregulation. Dysregulation being the one that is the most challenging for sure. There's also strengths, and people sometimes forget it. They're very creative. Those are the two that I love the most. They are very creative, resilient, and I should have put open-minded, because they're incredibly open-minded sometimes. Like that's the part that gets the most emotional about. Like they will, if you don't show them how to reject people or like just to judge people, they won't do it. It doesn't come natural to them. So if they will accept anyone, and I've seen them like interact with kids who have other diagnoses, sometimes severe diagnosis, and they barely notice that those children are different, which I think it's amazing. So a wicked analogy, I want to use that fictional character for you to embark with me on that journey that I embarked on with that movie, which like mirrors and parallels so well about the experience of having both identity, like combining identities that might have challenges, like strengths and challenges, of course. Here we're talking about Blackness and FASD. And for those who don't know, the character of Elphaba has a green skin, like her skin is green, and she has powers, but those powers shows up in, but I can say emotional dysregulation in the world. But we'll talk more about this. If you don't know what Wicked is, maybe you were living under a rock. I don't know. This is a story about, it's the Wizard of Oz through the perspective of Elphaba. The green witches was misunderstood and labeled as wicked, of course, because she's different. And she's intimidating because she has abilities that other people don't have. So, of course, she's rejected and judged, and experiences a lot of negative things. She has a friend who's not a friend at the beginning, who's Glinda, who you see on your screen in pink, but she's important, but she's still a secondary character. In my analogy, she doesn't really play, but we might talk about her later. So Elphaba. So of course, it is a perfect analogy to, in parallel, for someone, like, to talk about someone with those identities who means they're struggling in the world, in the environment that they live in. But what makes Wicked even more powerful for me when it comes to blackness and FASD is because from the very beginning of the movie, me personally, probably not anyone in this theater but me, I embark on a journey about FASD. For me, it was instant because the movie starts with Elphaba's mother. She's partying, she's like just having fun, and they keep the partying around that tiny green bottle. And she plays with it, she drinks off of it, whatever she does. And then you see, right after that, you see Elphaba being born, and she's green, everybody rejects her, and then her life of ostracization and judgment and etc. Everything that happens to her is right after that scene where her mother is drinking out of that bottle. So of course it's a first indication, but you could think it's an anecdote. Like maybe it's stuck with me because I parent my kids, and so I saw, okay, it's going to be a movie about kind of watching their experience on a screen. But we see later in the movie that Elphaba kept that bottle and is sleeping with that bottle underneath her pillow. So it is a very powerful symbol of how it impacted her. So for me, it was like the perfect analogy for FASD. Throughout the movie, also, they talk about topics like rejection, feeling small, trying to fit in, not fitting in, people judging you, being labeled as wicked, things being about appearances because their skin is green, so everything is about what she looks. Nobody really wants to know who she is, to learn about her and who she is. Like, she is so kind, she has a kind heart, but she experienced a lot of rejection. So many different topics that makes it the perfect analogy. So we talk about blackness, and I showed you why I kind of want to take you on the wicked journey, but because we want to talk about blackness and FASD. And to understand that, we use a concept called intersectionality. I talked about it at the beginning when I introduced myself. Maybe some people don't know what intersectionality is. And it's a concept that was created by a professor called Kimberly Crenshaw in the late 80s. And it was a way to really understand how identities are layered, and interacting with different environments and different systems, different institutions. Sometimes those identity compound together and impact the way you experience things, really. So imagine being a woman, you're a woman and you work and you experience sexism. When if you're a Black woman, you experience sexism and racism. So when you take the statistics and you're like, women are paid less, Black people are paid less, then Black women are paid less than everybody else. So that's kind of understanding intersectionality. And it matters because it changes how you really move through the world and your lived experience. So you can kind of build a roadmap to understand how people experience systemic barriers. So like I said, when you're a child, you're Black and you have FASD, you have those barriers that are compounded. You face barriers in the healthcare system, the education system, community spaces, because of being disabled and being of a certain race. So we talk about access, the way people interact with you, the quality of services, etc. There's a lot of cultural competency in those systems. Like, already you feel different. Imagine already you feel different. you know that you have that invisible disability. So you know the way, because it's your own experience. You move through the world and you can clearly see that there's a difference. Like you feel it in yourself, that it's part of you. But then you're also Black, and so you don't look like people around you. So it's the double kind of double discomfort of being different. And so when you need support and you want to access services, then you interact with people who don't get it. We don't get how awkward it can feel to be in that environment. Like you can see it or you don't know it, but I feel it. And so having a professional that understands that experience makes a huge difference, just to feel more comfortable and to have the proper accommodation. There's also the misdiagnosis or the late diagnosis due to stereotypes or even denial. I hope this one is pretty obvious, but of course, judging, like, we judge behavior differently depending on race. Unfortunately, that's been proven many, many times. So it can lead to misdiagnose. There's a lot of Black boys, for example, who are on the autism spectrum, but whose behavior is labeled as just difficult behavior and not something else, like defiant disorder, things like that. When it's in fact a different diagnosis, but this diagnosis is considered very later on, or even just misdiagnosed. Due to stereotypes, of course, but also denial. And denial coming from different angles. And that's also part of the intersectional experience of being Black and having a disability. Could be a denial from institutions or, for example, in the education system, but it could be also an internal denial, like from your community, who doesn't recognize the diagnosis because there's a taboo around it, or shame around any type of diagnosis. There's, of course, the obvious double burden of managing race and biases, racial bias, and neurodivergence, which we navigate in the world differently, and the impact of systemic underfunding and lack of representation, which we've talked about. But already it's hard to access quality services, but it's also hard to access services altogether. So that's also a compounded effect of being Black and having FASD. I put a little quote. It's not about aptitude. It's the way you're viewed. It's also because the first part of the movie, especially the character of Glinda, is a lot about what things look like. And so if you look good, you are good. And if you look bad, you're bad. And that's this dichotomy of evil and good. And also it speaks a lot to racism. Like what looking bad is. It depends on where you live in society. That might be a good time, and I wasn't about to do this, but because the way I said it's perfect timing. Race is a social construct. It's not a biological reality. So racism expresses itself or is manifests into the world, is as bad as the society that creates and upholds it, because it's a social construct. So there's something to think about, that we basically build the racism that people experience through experience and what we think is acceptable or not. So like I said, compounded barriers for kids who are Black and have FASD. But there are also mechanisms, like I just said, like race is a social construct, and we are building those systems where excluding people around stereotype and societal prejudice. And there's a lot of harmful narrative that are around Blackness, about Black people. And it's important to challenge them because they are very harmful. I'm thinking about the angry Black women, for example, how when Black women experience negative emotions, they're seen as angry, and so like confrontational or antagonistic. Just to express emotions, other emotions that other people are able to express, but they aren't because they're judged more harshly. I'm thinking about of course, I created this image for a very good reason. I don't know if people remember the Trevor Martin story, but seeing a Black teen with a hoodie doesn't mean that they are a thug or they are a criminal. But sometimes when you have those harmful narratives and those stereotypes, then it can lead to very dire and hopeful situation. So those stereotypes are kind of building it gives forces and power to racism, especially to systemic racism, because it keeps those stereotypes going. It's like a narrative. that's in people's mind continues, but why it is important to understand and challenge, because imagine how more likely kids who have FASD are more likely to display complicated behavior that can reinforce that narrative, that can reinforce a stereotype, and so that can reinforce how they experience racism on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, etc. So it's very important to understand those harmful narratives, because they are more likely, statistically, way more likely to happen to kids, Black kids who have FASD, than any other children statistically. So supporting them means understanding and deconstructing this. By now, because we talked about FASD, we talk about Blackness, compounded barriers, harmful stereotype and narrative, like things being about like what it looks like, etc. Hopefully by now you understand what Alphaba's story is so powerful for me, because she's very misunderstood. While being very powerful, our differences are not necessarily bad, but they are made to be bad. And it's a strong symbol for intersectional experiences, in my opinion. And I hope now you agree with me. And I love that quote, she doesn't lie, she's just trying to survive. I really believe that my kids are doing the best they can with what they have. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for the diagnosis. So they do need to navigate in a world that doesn't understand them and that they don't always understand. Like I said, it's hard for them to understand being different, like putting words into being different, feeling different. And I feel like it's the same being Black, of having a disability. It's hard to, you can feel it in yourself, you experience it, so your body will react, your emotion will show up, but you don't necessarily understand why, because you don't see why people are different. So there's kind of this weird cycle of isolation that's very difficult. So I do believe that my kids are doing their best, and I'm even more touched by she doesn't lie, she's just trying to survive, because lying is one of the things that happens a lot with kids with FASD. And it's important also to remember, like, they are trying to survive in a world that doesn't get them and that they don't get. And that's so much Alphabet stories that it totally resonated with me on a very deep level. And before we go to the next slide, the scene that cemented for me, wanted to share that parallel between Wicked and being Black and having FASD, is that scene, the bowl scene. For those who have seen the movie, they understand. For those who haven't seen the movie, I will describe it. Everybody, Alphaba, when she grows up, goes to a school called Wiz, and there's a ball. Everybody's invited to the ball. Of course, she's being bullied and excluded for the entire movie. Everybody's judging her on the color of her skin, so everybody's making fun of her. The very typical experience of someone that is different. But throughout the movie, she shows how compassionate, kind, smart, loyal she is. She's the perfect kid. If you don't judge her appearances, like, she's an amazing person, but no one sees it. No one sees it. And before the ball, her roommate, Glinda, was pretending to be nice mostly, gives her a hat, a black hat. Like, she gives her a black hat and says, "Oh, it's gonna look good if you come to the ball with this. It's a really nice hat." And Elphaba thinks it's true, and she's very happy because for once she feels like, "Oh, I might be included." Like, she is comfortable being vulnerable. She's letting her guard down a little bit. She thinks she's making connections. She's really happy. And then she gets to the ball and everybody makes fun of her because the hat is in fact very ugly and not fashionable at all. But Alphaba didn't realize it. So everybody makes fun of her. She's ridiculed. Everybody's pointing their fingers at her. It's a very terrible scene. And so the first time that I saw that scene, I cried. The second time, I cried even harder, and the third time, like, nothing could stop me. Really, it was terrible. And this is one of the first and main lesson I want you to have today, and it's a very important one. It's like what that pain mirrored. Really, that pain mirrored for me what my kids are experiencing. How oppression feels and showed up in the world, because she starts to dance on her own. Like she starts to dance alone in the ball, and she pretends that she doesn't care. She cares so much. She cares so much because she cries. She dances, but she cries. She thought she was going to connect, but she doesn't. And there's so much pain and despair into trying to connect with the world and being rejected. And I call it, and it comes uh, from sociology. It comes from sociology. It's called symbolic capital, and I call it symbolic violence, because what's violent for you is not necessarily violent for someone else. So you have to understand it. You have to see violence through a different lens, really. So what I really want, I hope you can use symbolic violence like as a term after this presentation, because it's hard for us to understand how violent those behaviors are for those kids when they feel rejected. Like it's a different part. It's just we don't get it. It's impossible to get it because it's just so different. And so it's going to show up. It's going to show, like, emotionally you will see that you will see a reaction that's often judged very negatively, because you think like, why is she always angry? Why she always react like this? Why is she always, it feels like she's always in a very bad, a negative state of mind. Because we don't get what symbolic violence is. Like that, those type of violence we don't feel, we don't get, we don't experience, so we don't understand it. So the way they handle and what shows up in the outside world for those kids is very different, and it's seen and judged very harshly often. And so there's a weight of judgment and rejection. So that's the first part, I think, that makes a difference when you're Black and you have a FASD. Because, sorry, one of my kids is sick and is home. Just give me 1 second. I'm just gonna. Sorry, she's sick, so she's home. She's okay. Okay. So yeah, so let's refocus. Sorry. So the way they express like being Black and having a FASD, it multiples the situation where you get negative interaction, when you get negative judgment. It multiplies all those experiences, and so the way you express it and it shows up in the world, of course, you're going to be misunderstood. So I think learning about how it impacts children emotionally makes a difference, so you can react differently to how they express their emotions. Another big topic that I selected, because I think it's one of the most challenging ones from afar, when you're Black and you have a FASD, it's how you experience racism and ableism at the same time when it comes to maturity expectations. Because already kids with FASD, they look older than their age is often older than their emotional age. So the way they behave sometimes there's a complete disconnect between what they're able to do, how they're able to be, what they can do, and what they look like. So for example, one of my daughter is 10, she wears 16, so she look big, tall, but emotionally she maybe is 5 or 6. So it's difficult to understand her behavior. It's very difficult to make sense of it. But Black children already are seen as seen as older than they are. They are supposed to be more mature. Like expectations are already different for Black children. And then you have a FASD, which means that your behavior is also already disconnected from what people think it should be. So I think it's the most difficult part for us to navigate as parents, which is be careful about unreasonable and unrealistic expectation for them, because the gap is huge and it creates a lot of animation for them. So it's about education. Like for today, for example, it's about educating people to understand the discrepancies and where they come from, and understand neurodevelopmental delays and how it interacts with systemic discrimination. So we don't have the situation where our kids are expected to behave in a way that they're not even able to. Another interesting aspect that I wanted to talk about today when it's with the interaction between being Black and being disabled is that there's those two mechanisms, coping mechanisms, that I think are necessary and also toxic at the same time, but there's no judgment because I think they serve a purpose. Is code switching and masking. So code switching, it's for someone who wants to fit in and has a specific identity. So they want to fit in, they're worried about being rejected or judged. So they will try and mimic how people are behaving, or their tastes, what they say, the way they talk, whatever it needs to be done just to fit in. So they're not being themselves. It's not their true self. They don't show up at their true self. I'm thinking about people in the workplace, for example. There's a lot of Black people who say I need to act differently when I'm at work, because if I show up as where I really am, which is someone who behaves in a certain way from a certain community, for a Black community, for example, I will be judged and I will be seen as lesser, because that's what racism is, unfortunately. So they change themselves. They don't show up as their true self in the world. And therefore, it's hard to just you don't feel comfortable. It's really hard to find a safe space when you feel you can be yourself. And being Black and having disability, then you multiply that, because how many spaces where you actually feel seen and understood? Like you have less and less space where you're like, oh, people get it. And more space when you feel to code switch. And that's more of on the being Black side, the code switch. I do this all the time. I'm mixed race, so I know how to navigate a lot of different aspects of the social interactions. And it can be funny because it's easy when you're mixed race, but it's also a burden when you enter a space and like I'm not gonna be myself. And what if it's your workplace? So you're not gonna be yourself your entire day. What if it's your school? Then you spend majority of it like you spend the majority of the time somewhere you don't feel like you belong and you cannot even be yourself. And there's the same mechanism, coping mechanism in the disabled community, which is masking. Masking is pretending that you're not disabled, that you can do anything. It's being autistic, being on the autism spectrum, and pretending that you're not struggling. My daughter does that a lot at school. When she comes home, she's exhausted from just masking all day, pretending that everything is fine. I don't have a FASD. I don't struggle with emotion. I don't struggle with this social interaction. No, I'm fine. But when I go, like I'm home, I'm exhausted and I'm tapped out. So this is where parenting is very challenging, because you need to have strong boundaries while you're having empathy, and you need to juggle everything, because you know that they live in an environment where it's very hard. And I love that quote from Wicked too. Too long I've been afraid of losing love. I guess I've lost. Well, if that's love, it comes at much too high a cost, which comes from the famous song Gravity, because I think you want to be accepted, so you're willing to do anything, but you completely lose yourself. And it's hard as a parent to educate kids that it's important to be yourself. And because they do feel like, I can see they feel lost. I can see they don't know who they are anymore, because they spend so much time pretending that they lose themselves. And to build strong roots and self-identity, self-confidence, like every parent has to do it. We have to do it even more. Like it's just 10 times. You wouldn't even believe. You need an actual plan, a strategic plan, to make sure that they can be who they are and not completely lose themselves. And so I started to speak as a parent, like parenting. And I want to share a little bit more of my experience before I finish. I have a bit more slides. I don't even know what time it is, but I'm going to continue talking. So there's a lot of parallel with just being parents of kids with disability. Like we all experience a lot of the same things, but there are very specific things when it comes to parenting Black and even more parenting Black children who have a FASD as a Black parent. Like it's just, like I said, it's compounding. Hopefully by now you followed the idea. So of course, parents who are parenting kids with disabilities do experience challenges and isolation. That's a very common topic. But like I said, like our challenges are layered. Like one of my kids is queer, Black, multiple disabilities, like this advocating for the kid is a lot. It's a job, basically. And it's more than the typical parents for sure. And I've selected the thing that I don't like to hear, knowing that this is my reality. So for this is like, I don't like people saying, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how I do it either. Newsflash. But do I have a choice though? I don't have a choice but to do this. So please, and if you see that I'm struggling, just don't say that. Just offer support. It's even better. So maybe every time you have, I don't know how you do it in your brain, let it flow through your brain and come out as offering support. It'd be great. The lack of empathy. People don't understand FASD. People don't understand necessarily what being Black is, but it's the experience of being Black. You can see that other people who don't experience racism don't get it. Like they really don't understand how it happens, how it shows up. I had people challenging and questioning me, denouncing or talking about racism. I interact with people since I was born. I interact with hundreds and hundreds of people. I can spot racism, ableism, a lot of ism because of my identity very quickly. So anyone who challenges me, I will challenge back because you don't understand. It's the result of hundreds of interaction that makes this interaction clear. Like I know this is discrimination. I'm not even asking you to validate. So there's a lack of empathy and the lack of understanding for sure. And what I hate people to say about my kids is like, it's not that bad. Like they don't look that disabled. Well, I don't know why this is even relevant and what it is even supposed to make a difference, but thank you. So also intense advocacy. Like I said, layered identities. You have to explain, re-explain again and again and again and again about every aspect of their identities. So I've done countless lessons about anti-Black racism, discrimination, systemic racism, et cetera, to many different type of organization. And I ended up making it my job because it was already my job, being parenting my kids. It was already my job. And I gathered so much information, knowledge, tips, and all the things that I had to do it. But also the thing that someone told me something that made me very emotional one day. They wanted to educate themselves, just like what you're doing today. And at some point they said, I want to learn as much as I can so I can take the burden of advocacy off your shoulder. And I honestly could have cried because I thought, people want to do that? That'd be great. Because the problem that people don't understand is we already have more on our shoulders than most parents having kids with disabilities or multiple diagnoses. So it's already intense and a lot. But somehow people, institutions, society, whatever it is, always find a way to put more on the plate, more. And I really hate when people ask me how they can support my kids when it's their job to support my kids. I shouldn't be the one making their job. You should do your job because I'm already busy. I'm already overwhelmed. I don't want to take that on. So it's very frustrating. Stigma and misunderstanding. FASD notoriously misunderstood for sure. And stigma, of course, we talk about racism and being Black. But I think the worst part is, especially with invisible disabilities and people not understanding, like being kind of colorblind. You know, color doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, when people experience something, you're not able to help them or even see that their experience is discrimination because you don't actively trying to deconstruct racism around you. So I don't like to hear they don't look disabled. Are they supposed to? What disabled means or looks like? And also, you don't know about masking, you don't know switching. So of course, they also master at disguising themselves. So not great. Invisible barrier. They look good. They're great. Like they're thriving. A lot of work. And also, you don't know how much they struggle because you don't see it. They struggle way more than regular kids because of what we are discussing today. And I wanted to highlight one part of my experience as a parent, parenting Black kids who have a FASD. And I mentioned it earlier, but it's multi-angle pressures that I feel sometimes. I feel it less because I'm very unapologetic and I've learned and I'm like, my personal experience gives me more, a better grasp on reality than other people. But I know that sometimes, like I said, there's a multi-angle pressures because they come from communities, like Blacks and Black communities are very special way of doing things, very special expectation, et cetera, but also institution, system, et cetera, also are putting pressures on, get the diagnosis, do this, do that, don't do this. So, you know what I mean? Like we're kind of stuck between two things. I'm trying to feel like I'm a very positive person. I'm kind of a silver lining specialist, kind of. So I try to calm myself. Lucky because I can take what works in both and push away like what doesn't work and what's unhelpful. But one of the things that I hear a lot from other Black parents is like, we don't do discipline well, like discipline, and from not just from Black communities, but also from people who are looking at the way Black communities parent and think it's not good, or judging more like negatively. And so I wanted to talk about behavioral management and racism, because behavioral management is a necessity with FASD. You cannot not do behavioral management. You have to have a way, a plan, strategy, whatever it is, you need to have a good understanding of what are the behavioral management needs of your kids, because they cannot regulate their emotion often. They need constant co-regulation. One of my kids needs constant co-regulation. Like you cannot leave her for a second, because she was extremely impulsive. She also can't regulate her emotion well, maturity, discrepancies, etc. But in order to achieve that, like you need things like boundaries, you need to have authority, you need to a lot of different things that you need to put into place, and culture comes into play because there are cultural expectations. And there are personal expectations, there are system expectations, like so many different expectations of we're doing things. And there's a clash with racism that happens very quickly because the way of Black parenting is seen as negative. Black communities are overrepresented in the child welfare system, and for no real reason but systemic racism. It was proven time and time again that Black people don't parent worse than other parents. They're not bad at doing their job. They're actually exactly the same. And for some research that shows that for some aspect of behavioral management, they're actually doing better. For violent behavior, for example, some cultures have better ways to handle those behavior because of the way they live in community, the way they do. Like adults have different roles, like they are more than just two parents because the nuclear family is very restrictive, like et cetera, et cetera. So behavioral management, there's always a risk behind like how you choose to manage your kids' behavior when you're Black and they're Black. Because there could be a potential negative perception of this. And also you will, like the expectations are different. And I go back to the symbolic violence analogy, like a concept that I use often. In some culture, there are things that you cannot compromise on. Maybe other families can. I've heard like sometimes when parents deal with a lot of violence, they will say, okay, they can swear in the house, but they have to go to school. Like you have to kind of pick and choose your battles. But sometimes to be part of some communities, to be integrated into communities, there are things that you cannot compromise on. Like insulting your parents in front of community leaders, it's a no. Like it's never going to happen. If you want to be integrated, if you're going to be part of it. So expectations are culturally, like they have a culture. There's a cultural aspect to expectation often that need to be respected and acknowledged. That is very important. And I've heard Black parents time and time again say that about kids. There's also the limit of, they cannot behave and like the way they want everywhere. They need to be safe. So you need to teach them also. And sometimes behavioral management, like you need to understand the Black experience, understand the angst and the anxiety behind how we do behavioral management, because we are worried for a very specific reason that you might not understand. So you need to have that respectful way to interact also with different communities, because you need to understand their experience, their specific experience. I love the concept of compassionate accountability, because you need to make sure you are accountable. Like you need to teach your kids to have that empathy, that to acknowledge what they did, but also have compassion and accountability for themselves, for the people. And I think there is a beautiful way to do it as a parent when you come from a specific culture, because you can teach that with pride, et cetera, et cetera. So I think behavioral management also can be seen, like it should be so positive when it comes to Black communities specifically, because I think I do this pretty well because I was taught so many good things about creating boundaries. I think it's very important. And people struggle with boundaries a lot. I struggle less. So I think it comes from something specific. And also cultural competence and humility for relevant support, navigating discipline strategies, which is I can help parents who have a different experience than mine. I can help Black parents that might be struggling with this behavioral management in a respectful way, but I have a lot to learn from them. It needs to be both ways. I need to be reciprocal. We need to be in a state of mind where I have a lot to learn and I have a lot to share, but it's a collaboration, because I see too often that Black communities are seen as lesser, or the way they parent is not good, when I see so much wealth that's untapped. It's just, to me, it's just so sad, because there's so much to learn, and I think it's very important for me to talk about, and maybe to put that little thing in your brain today, is authority. What is authority? How do you see authority? Like reclaiming, like I put it at the bottom just for as a reflection, like reclaiming authority with dignity, because how do you see authority figures? Like I know that my grandmother, I could have said, oh, I'm scared of my grandmother because she was the authority figure, but I wasn't sure she was going to hurt me. She has that authority as the matriarch of the family. But saying this as a Black woman at school, for example, might be seen as very negative. Some people would jump to conclusion and say, oh, it's because she's violent, like she's physically, emotionally, whatever violence it is. So people make a connection very quickly with authority, discipline, and violence with Black people. And I really invite you to be careful to not do that, because you need authority. Kids with FASD need an authority figure. I think it's key for them to being able to function well, to be functional. So now we're at the end. I have no clue what time it is. I haven't rechecked because I've talked and talked and talked. But you've learned a lot about racism, about ableism, about what it is, the experience, and everything. But this is where I want you to be cautious and to think about, how am I going to use what I've learned today? What am I going to do with it? And something that I think always gets me so mad, and it's so problematic, is how people experience pity for my kids. I was taught that in my community, especially by my mother, that pity is a very harmful and unhelpful emotion or feeling, because it's disempowering for the people. Like you feel it that for it's easy to see them as victim, just to feel sad and to feel disengaged because you don't know what to do. It's very easy to feel disengaged and to disempower people. It's also not a very positive force to try and create change. It's kind of rooted in something negative and sad. So I will definitely invite you to avoid disempowerment and not let pity prevent meaningful growth. I see times and time again where it's not because you know what my care experience is and you've seen that presentation and now you know how hard it is. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do your things to like push them to be the best version of themselves. I think when there's a disability, for FASD, for example, neuroflexibility for FASD, like they need to be pushed, like they need to be challenged, they need boundaries. Like that's when I say compassionate accountability. They need those boundaries because it's not built in. So you need to be firm sometimes. Even if you have compassion, even if you know it's hard, it's when you know it's necessary, like, okay, you know why they lie. It's still not good. It's still bad to lie. You still need to teach them that it's a bad thing to lie. It's bad to steal. It's like to hurt. Like those things are bad and need to stay bad no matter how much you understand them. So you need to be able to be firm. And I've had many times, very difficult times, where people let their pity just them being just not doing anything, just excusing everything, excusing every behavior, looking away, just not feeling comfortable. No, you need to stay engaged and know that they need it. Like it's not gonna always going to be easy. But if my kid was, I don't know, if my kid was blind, for example, and I need them to learn Braille, and they don't want to learn Braille, and they behave, and it's hard, and they fight it. Well, you're going to do it. I'm sorry, buddy, but you need this to be functional in this society, to be included. So if it's a disability, you need to push them to achieve something, and it might be difficult, but we cannot give up on this. Encouraging resilience, focusing on strengths instead of deficits. They have a lot of strengths, trust me. It's pretty amazing. And I invite you to explore that and talk to someone who has a FASD, because I think they're the best people to talk about this. Building trust through genuine support, which is, I understand what your experience is. I've learned, and now tell me what you need. Let's build that trust. I want you to know, I understand that there's not a lot of safe spaces for you. I'm going to co-create one with you. I think that would be a beautiful thing to see. And the most important one that I put at the top is practical empathy. I think empathy could be bad. I really believe that there's pity and empathy that can be very, when they're too connected, they're too close to each other, it's not a good thing because it's disempowering. I think you need to make sure that you have a practical way to use your empathy, which means I have empathy, so I want to create change. So whatever it takes, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do things that are going to make me feel good. I need to be willing to feel bad in order to achieve what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's a key element. I think people, emotion gets in the way, especially with FASD. They already have a lot of emotions. So we cannot center our own, even if we need to respect and acknowledge our emotions, we cannot let them lead. And so sometimes, doing what's right, it's not always what feels right. So don't have pity. It leads to genuine support and will, in opposition to performative allyship. This is where also I should talk about Glinda in Wicked. She is the good. She's pink, she's bubbly, she's nice. She behaves like she's very good and inclusive. Like that's the way she moves in this world. Like she looks like she's an ally. She's not. It's performative. You don't want to be that. You want to be sure you are the person who are actually doing the work and doing the things. And so looking at the person you want to try to support and trying the best way to support them, which is great for you to be there today. What you can do right now, those practical ways that would personally make a difference today, it's making sure there's culturally competent providers. Like make sure if you have someone that tell them, like maybe think about trying to find someone who's culturally competent to support your child, support you. You can amplify Black advocacy voices, like mine, for example. Create community-led workshops and listening sessions to learn more, which is great that you're doing this today. And where the most meaningful part is for me to form peer mentorship groups for parents, because meeting other parents who have kids with FASD and who are Black is priceless to me. What's important also is building a supportive system for the future, because we need to look at the future. I think this future is something that stressed me the most, because my kids, it's FASD, you never know how it's going to evolve. So it's always there's a lot of instability. So I need to look at a future that is bright, where I can feel confident my kids are going to be okay. And so what would make a difference, and it's from my own perspective, of course, today, because it's my lived experience, increase in funding for mental health resources, because we don't have enough support, but also there's not enough money. So more money in the system. Advocate for inclusive education policies, because at school, I'm sick and tired of like seeing the word inclusion everybody, sorry, the word inclusion everywhere, but people don't understand that if you say we need more inclusion, I mean, you're admitting that there are kids who are excluded. Those are my kids. What are you doing for that? Most people, I have to do it. I have to, like I said, educate, take initiative, or making sure people understand what it means. Like it's more than a word, it's actions. So that'd be great. And provide anti-racist training for educators, like actual practical ones that would make a difference. And that's address disparities in their healthcare access, because this is pretty terrible. Final reflection for me, the analogy with Wicked and this presentation is for you to just get a little closer to the experience, to understand a bit better the experience of having being Black and having a FASD, because at the end of the day, we want them to develop self-love, self-confidence, self-control, We want them to feel seen and empowered. We want them to develop resilience, strength even through adversity. And we want to resist a society that wants to exclude them. Because at the end of the day, if you knew them, then you're changed for good. And maybe against all odds together, we make sure they thrive and they are happy and functional kids. And we are not exhausted parents, because I'm pretty tired too. Thank you for your commitment to learning and advocacy. Thank you for being here and for listening. I hope it was clear, but we hopefully have a little bit of time for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. That was an excellent presentation, actually. So Alice, when creating support groups for children and youth with FASD, do you think we should be creating groups specifically for Black children slash youth, or do you or do you think a more inclusive model is better, or do you think we should offer both? For context, Health Nexus received an application and provided funding for a provincial group for caregivers of Black children with FASD the last 2 funding cycles.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think I benefited from this. Actually, this is where I met a few parents. I think both is great. You get different different positive aspects of being in a safe space. So personally, and I'm going to share my experience, I feel the safest and when I can thrive and really be my full self if I'm in a queer Black space. Like, yes, if people are queer, my queer identity is not going to be questioned. If people are Black, they understand the experience. And even women would be great too. But, the more identities are in the space, the more comfortable I feel. But I don't necessarily always feel like I need that level of safety. Like I still live in that society, so I'm comfortable just navigating through things. So depending on what I need, like what I feel the most vulnerable about is going to be like very relevant. So if I feel like, oh my God, I've experienced a lot of questions and negative feelings about my queerness, I want to be in a queer space because I know I'm not going to experience that. It's de facto, like we say, de facto safe space about my queerness. So it's great. If I've experienced a lot of misunderstanding about my race or about like being Black, people don't get it, then for me, it will be about like, I want to be in a culturally safe space. So I want a Black space where I can be around Black people. And so I don't have to be worried about racism. So both have very different ways, like both are very relevant depending on how you feel, how vulnerable you feel, or where you feel. But yes, for sure, if I'm in the space, like I can only imagine if you're Black and you have a FASD, being in a space with other kids who are Black and have a FASD would be great. Though the caveat I think that I should remind you, like from the presentation, is that it's even hard for kids who have FASD to understand the difference. Like to put themselves, like they don't necessarily have the empathy to be in someone else's shoes that will discriminate against people who are Black, because it doesn't make sense. Like I know for my kids, we talk about Blackness, we need to make them understand and embody and get racism. So many ism we need to teach them. It's a bit exhausting, but yeah. So I think FASD, maybe the FASD part would be the most pertinent in my opinion, because it's harder to find kids who have FASD and to interact with other kids who have FASD that Black kids, because we do have, having Black friends is easier, more accessible usually.
Thank you. We also have a comment over here from someone, which I think is a common theme for everyone today. I love the wicked analogy. Thank you, Alice, for a great presentation. And then we also have a question. How did you create a behavior management strategy plan for your children with FASD?
So it depends on their needs, to be honest. It's pretty wild sometimes how different their needs are. So it's hard to put into place. But for me, it's about, I'm trying to pinpoint where they struggle the most. And then I address that. So for example, executive functioning, giving them tasks around the house because I know they struggle with that. Maybe I'm going to give a little more to one kid, maybe less, just to work on that. And I know that I will expect, like basically, there's one of my kids, if I give him a task around the house, I can expect big behaviors because she doesn't want to do that, because she struggled with executive functioning. but I need to know that this is her behavior. Like, I need to have that distance. Sometimes I need to have the distance with, she's going to react because she struggles, but I need to let her have that reaction and still do that, make her do the task because she's learning something. So it's often behavioral management is about, you know, what does the behavior looks like, why it manifests, and maybe try and figure this out. Because I feel like when you know why it's there, you know when you need to push and when you need to let go. I think it's kind of a push and pull. So sometimes if I know my kid is tired and I'm going to see behaviors, I know it's about them being tired, so I'm just going to let it go because, you know, they're tired. But if they just struggle to do something and don't want to do it, then I'm going to push through because no, you can have your reaction. And if I can add something to, like, you need to figure out what their needs are and just match it. But for when we take the cultural aspect, because I talk about this today, for me, it's about what are my expectations? How do I connect my expectation with who they are with the plan? Because like I said, I'm very worried about them misbehaving in public because they're seen as older and they're Black and police, the justice system, etc. So my expectations and my anxiety might influence my plan. So I need to be aware that they're kids. You can be worried. Society needs to figure their things out because it's not always on them to behave in a way that they're not able to. So it has an influence. And also think about my culture. And I want them to be integrated and to be included in my culture and my community. So there are things that I need to integrate into the behavioral plan because they cannot behave in certain ways. Like they cannot disrespect elders. And I've heard parents say, "Oh, you know, we gave up on this because they can't. Like they just, you know, they swear, they do anything like that. Like I cannot." And I've thought about this with other Black parents. Like it's not. We cannot compromise on this. It's about their identity and fitting in. So there is just battles that we'll integrate as Black people. I believe we will integrate into the behavioral plan because this is a no compromise zone, but other parents might choose to actually compromise on this. And you have to adjust to the needs of your kids, but the needs of your families too.
Thank you, Alice. Next question. As a white parent, what could you suggest to help make sure we are advocating for our son with FASD? We are a very open home and want him to feel safe and secure. He is often the first one blamed in the neighborhood or school when something happens.
Yes, yeah. That's why also I chose the wicked analogy because definitely it's so easy, you know, scapegoating. It's been done for really really long time, centuries, and so we know that when there's identity that layered, it's easier to make you the scapegoat for sure. Um, Advocating, I start by educating people, but in a very blunt way, saying, like I said, I'm unapologetic because I've experienced, like, I know what racism looks like, I know what discrimination looks like, so I will name it. I will name it. I wasn't always comfortable doing that, but it's efficient. Like saying to people, like, this is racist. Do you realize this is racist? Like, can you acknowledge? Like, can you see how it is? Do you want me to explain it to you? And I've done that a lot lately with school specifically. I always like put it on the table, like, you know that there's racism in the system, you know that in your school this happens, etc. So and teaching people also how to receive feedback as a gift. Like I don't want to deal with other people's emotions. Like already I'm hurt because if your child is being scapegoated by the neighborhood all the time because there's something wrong, already it's a bad situation and you feel bad about this and it's not fair. So I'm not going to deal with other people's emotions. So speak up, name it, and educate people. And I think something that helps me a lot when it comes to education is that if people rob you of your comfort, like of feeling good about your kid because you know they might be in bad situation, people are going to blame them, that people are robbing you from your comfort. Like they are changing the way you feel. They create anxiety, they create stress. So you don't owe them their comfort. You just don't. They create that bad feeling in you. You don't have to tiptoe around telling them what's happening. if it's true and this is what it is, just name it, say it, and leave it at it. And they can deal with their own emotion. But you don't owe comfort to people who are robbing your own comfort.
So someone over here in the Q&A asked, hello, in my community, there's not a large Black community. For example, graduating class had one Black graduate. I work with a Black youth with FASD. How do I help them connect and identify with their Blackness? They want this, but it is not as accessible to them. They were adopted by a Caucasian family.
Oh yeah, I've heard it a lot. Definitely heard it a lot. This is this is usually questions that I try to dodge and not answer because it kind of makes me sad to know that you have to even do that work of connecting, because I mean you were uprooted in the first place. So for me it's difficult because there's not a right blueprint to how to connect with the Black communities, because you know it's most of the time you connect with your community because it's organic, you're part of it. So I see it with my kids because I'm from France. I was raised in a different community, a different way, and every day they remind me they're not connected as much as I want them to all communities that are around. So I need to find ways to connect them to the Jewish community, to the Black community, to Korean community, and the French community, and there's a lot. And so I don't have the perfect way to do it, to be honest, but looking for organization around that are working with Black youth, that are working with Black families, community centers, programs, festival, for example, I think are a great moment where you can find maybe connection. But I would kind of throw all my eggs in the same basket of mentorship. I've heard great success with mentorship, like trying to find the one person that's going to be the access point to the community. I think it's much easier to piggyback on someone's connection to the community than trying to create your own. Because also with communities, the problem is there's a lot of gatekeeping because they want to keep away people who are not part of the community just because they have their own safe space. So they don't want to let in just anyone, which is completely understandable. We see that a lot with interaction with system like CAS. Like people don't want to deal with CAS. I've write a report about adopting, being Black and being adoptive parents. And one of the things that I see in Black communities is that there's a lot of informal adoption because they don't want to deal with the formal way of adopting because they don't want to deal with CA, they don't want to deal with the system. So there's a lot of informal situations that happen in community, and so they are not always open. So my advice would be try and find someone who would open the doors for you.
Thank you so much, Alice. That brings us to the end of our time today. So I'd really like to thank you for this wonderful presentation today. It was really insightful, and I'd like to thank all of our participants for listening from across the province. Take care, everyone, and stay tuned for more webinars by Health Nexus.
Thank you for coming.